Hello guys, welcome back to VP Reacts and I'm Vicky.
Peter here.
Welcome to today's reaction episode and today we're back with some interesting documentary about every Beatle explained in just 16 minutes. So let's find out much about this. But this was shared to us by Dan. So thank you so much Dan for this. Thank you for your support. And Dan mentioned that this video is all about the Beatles members from 1960 to 1962. So we all know of the four Beatles, John, George, Ringo, and Paul. But they were before Ringo joined, there were another drummist that was Pete, and then there was also another member. Just forgot his name.
I think they mentioned him.
Yeah, so that's where we're going to find out like more of the Beatles from the 60 to the 62. So stay tuned and let's enjoy it.
Exactly. As we give justice to the early Beatles, who maybe they were forgotten in the history of Beatles. And this the reason why we do it each and every day, bringing you good, forgettable and unforgettable timeless tunes here in our family. So it's a reason for you to subscribe and check a Buy Me Coffee link that you can use to support and bring your favorite to be featured next, or maybe a discovery that you'd like us to discover together with you. Bring that on Buy Me Coffee link. Don't forget to join Patreon. That is besides the Buy Me Coffee link on our channel description. For today's episode, let's find out more on the
Pete Best. In August of 1962, Pete Best was told he was no longer a Beatle. John, Paul, and George did not tell him. They sent the manager. Within a few weeks, the band appeared on their first single. It went on to sell hundreds of thousands of copies. Pete Best had been the Beatles' drummer for 2 years. He was there for the Hamburg sessions that forged the band's sound in clubs that ran until 4 in the morning. He was there for the early Liverpool shows at the Cavern Club. He was there for the recordings that first attracted the attention of producer George Martin. He was there for the years of work that nobody saw. He was gone before the years of fame that everyone remembers. The official explanation for his replacement was vague and has remained vague. George Martin expressed a preference for a session drummer on the recordings. The other 3 members had developed reservations that were never fully articulated to Best directly. Ringo Starr was offered the position and accepted. Ringo had been playing in Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. He was known to the Beatles from Hamburg. Best was informed by manager Brian Epstein. The 3 musicians he had played alongside for 2 years were not present. He never received a clear explanation. Best attempted a solo career that generated brief interest and then faded. He worked in a bakery in Liverpool.
This is your
You wore a shirt written, I'm not Ringo.
Yeah. And the painful part is that they lacked to explain, or maybe they did
explain to him the best explanation on why they were firing him.
Was eventually persuaded to record again in the 1990s, when Anthology, the Beatles' official retrospective, included recordings from the Hamburg era that featured him. He received a royalty payment. That payment resolved, at least financially, the years of watching the band he had been part of become the most successful act in music history. Pete Best was replaced just weeks before Love Me Do. He spent the following 6 decades being more famous for having lost than he would ever have been for having stayed. The drummer who was there for the beginning is remembered almost entirely for the ending, Stuart Sutcliffe. Stuart Sutcliffe did not want to be a musician, he wanted to be a painter. John Lennon met him at Liverpool College of Art in 1959. Sutcliffe was considered the more talented of the two. His painting instructor described him as exceptional, a student who understood composition instinctively in a way that took most artists decades to develop. Lennon persuaded him to join the band anyway, using money Sutcliffe had received from selling a painting to buy a bass guitar. Sutcliffe could not play bass. He learned enough to perform, standing with his back to the audience to conceal his limited technique. In Hamburg, where the band played residencies that lasted months, he met a German photographer named Astrid Kirchherr. He fell in love with her. He decided to stay. In 1961, Stuart Sutcliffe left the Beatles to remain in Hamburg and pursue painting. On April 10th, 1962, the day the remaining Beatles arrived in Hamburg for another residency, Stuart Sutcliffe Sutcliffe died of a brain hemorrhage. He was 21 years old. The cause was never definitively established. Some accounts suggest a head injury sustained in a fight outside a venue months earlier. The medical records have never been fully released. John Lennon, who had been closer to Sutcliffe than to any of the other Beatles, rarely spoke about his death publicly and at length. The grief was documented in fragments, in interviews, in letters, in the specific quality of his silence on the subject. Sutcliffe left the Beatles to become an artist. He never saw what the Beatles became. The paintings he produced in Hamburg in the final months of his life are now housed in galleries and considered significant works. He got what he left for. He simply did not get enough time with it. George Harrison. George Harrison was the youngest Beatle, the quietest, and the one most...
So he lost his life like way earlier. So he didn't even get a chance to experience the Beatles' success.
Yeah, and even what he chose.
Yes, like, wow, that's so painful.
Consistently underestimated by everyone around him, including, at times, his own bandmates. He joined the group in 1958 at 15 years old, recruited by Paul McCartney, who had recognized his guitar ability. In the early years of the band, his contributions were largely confined to playing the parts he was assigned. Lennon and McCartney wrote the songs, Harrison played them. The arrangement was understood rather than negotiated, and Harrison understood it without fully accepting it. By the mid-1960s, he had begun writing his own material. Something released in 1969 was described by Frank Sinatra as the greatest love song of the past 50 years. While My Guitar Gently Weeps, which Harrison recorded with Eric Clapton on lead guitar because he felt the other Beatles would take it more seriously with an outside musician present, is now considered one of the finest recordings in the band's catalog. All Things Must Pass, Harrison's...
His thoughts were just crazy. Like the other Beatles would take it like at least more serious. At least when there's another one and someone else from outside present. I think they were just ignoring him so much.
First proper solo album, released in 1970, was a triple record containing songs he had accumulated during years of having his compositions rejected for Beatles albums. It reached #1 in both the United Kingdom and the United States. No other ex-Beatle released a debut solo album of that scale and immediate success. In 1971, Harrison organized the Concert for Bangladesh, widely regarded as the first major charity rock concert in history, bringing together Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, Ravi Shankar, and Ringo Starr for 2 shows at Madison Square Garden. The model he created became the template for Live Aid, Farm Aid, and every large-scale benefit concert that followed. The least credited Beatle built the most structurally significant post-Beatles career. The songs they would not record became one of the most successful and acclaimed solo albums released by any of them. George Harrison spent 10 years being told his work was not quite good enough. He spent the next 30 years proving what that assessment had cost. John Lennon, December 8th, 1980, New York City, the Dakota Building on the Upper West Side. John...
Oh, I think on Lennon he started from...
The word go.
Yeah, the last time that he was here, I think he started from his tragic death.
In the back as he walks toward the entrance of his own home. He is pronounced dead at Roosevelt Hospital at 11:07 at night. He is 40 years old. Mark David Chapman had been outside the Dakota since morning. Earlier that day, Lennon had signed his copy of Double Fantasy, the album released just weeks before, in the street outside the building. A photograph exists of the two of them at that moment. Lennon signed and got into a car. Chapman waited 6 hours in the cold for him to return. Chapman offered no political motive, no organizational connection, no ideological framework. He wanted, he said, to be famous. He pleaded guilty in 1981 and has been...
Like, he said he wanted to be famous. Like,
by killing someone?
shooting someone for you to be famous.
But I think he is die. What name can I give him? I think there is some truth that he was hiding, and
Of course,
being
yeah,
paid
yeah.
for it. I
You
couldn't
can't
disclose.
mention it.
Yeah,
Maybe
couldn't
if it was a
disclose.
political influence, of course you can't mention it because maybe they will come for your family and all that. So you have to like find your own reason. But I feel like he could just be like charged of murder and like be given a murder sentence too.
Repeatedly denied parole. The straightforward account of Lennon's murder has been complicated for decades by what came before it. Between 1971 and 1973, the Nixon administration directed the FBI to monitor Lennon's movements, record his conversations, and attempt to deport him from the United States. The motivation was his anti-war activism and his potential to influence the 1972 presidential election. The surveillance files were released through Freedom of Information requests beginning in 1983 and confirmed the scale of federal interest in Lennon as a political threat. The surveillance stopped in 1975. Lennon was killed in 1980. No investigation has established a connection between the government's years of wanting him silenced and the man who silenced him. After Chapman's guilty plea, no official investigation seriously pursued any wider conspiracy or link to the earlier government surveillance. Lennon had grown up working class in Liverpool, raised by an aunt after his mother was struck and killed by a car when he was 17. He had co-founded the most successful band in history, dismantled it publicly, moved to New York, and spent the 1970s oscillating between radical political performance and extended periods of deliberate withdrawal from public life. He had just returned to music when Chapman shot him. The most political Beatle died in front of his home in the city he had chosen as his own. The government that had spent years treating him as a threat stopped watching him 5 years before he was killed. The man who built his career on demanding to be heard was silenced without political consequence by a man who simply wanted attention. Yoko Ono. Yoko Ono did not break up the Beatles. The Beatles broke up the Beatles, but she was the easiest person to blame, and blaming her was easier than examining what the four men inside the band had done to each other. Across a decade of extraordinary pressure, commercial expectation, and creative competition, there was no precedent and no rule book. Yoko Ono was born in Tokyo in 1933 into one of Japan's most prominent banking families. She was educated at Gakushuin University in Tokyo. She later studied music and art at Sarah Lawrence College in New York. By the time she met John Lennon in 1966, she was already an established figure in the international avant-garde art scene, a conceptual artist. Her work had been exhibited in galleries in New York and London. Her instruction-based pieces prefigured what became known as Fluxus. Her reputation in serious art circles required no connection to any rock musician to sustain it. She met Lennon at her own exhibition at the Indica Gallery in London in November 1966. He arrived expecting to be unimpressed. He climbed a ladder to read a word printed on the ceiling in tiny letters. He used a magnifying glass. The word was yes. He came back the next day. The accusation that followed her into the recording studio has followed her for 50 years. That she inserted herself into the creative space of the Beatles and poisoned it. The people who were actually in the studio tell a more complicated story. Yoko Ono sat beside John Lennon during sessions. She said very little. The tension in those rooms predated her by years. It existed between four men who had been confined together under impossible pressure since their teens. By the late 1960s, they had developed irreconcilable differences about what the band was and where it was going. She was present, she was not the cause. On December 8th, 1980, Yoko Ono was walking into the Dakota building with John Lennon when Mark David Chapman fired several shots. 4 of them hit John Lennon. She was beside him when he fell. She rode with him to Rose.
I can imagine how that was traumatic to her. Seeing your husband being shot and then witnessing every last moment of him, like him bleeding to the last point, like that was so traumatic.
Yeah.
I don't know if you will ever heal from that. At some point, even you can blame yourself. Why did that? Like, you could have shot me too. We go together, because like that trauma of you seeing someone you've been together for such a long time
It
being
kills you from inside, yeah.
Yeah.
Roosevelt Hospital. She was told he was dead. She has managed his estate, his recordings, and his public legacy ever since, protecting the archive, controlling the image, spending over 4 decades being one of the most publicly criticized widows in the history of popular culture. Yoko Ono is 93 years old. She is still working. The woman history blamed for ending the Beatles outlived John Lennon and George Harrison. She was there at the beginning of Lennon's final chapter, beside him when it ended, and has spent the time since ensuring that what he made did not disappear with him. History gave her the wrong role in the wrong story. She was never the villain of the Beatles. She was the last witness to John Lennon, and the first guardian of what he left behind. Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney has never fully stopped. He was a teenager when he met John Lennon at a church fete in Liverpool in 1957. He has been making music in public ever since, through the Beatles, through Wings, through a solo career that has now lasted longer than the Beatles existed by a factor of several times over. He has written or co-written more #1 singles than almost any other musician in history. Yesterday, which he composed entirely alone, is the most covered song ever recorded, with over 3,000 versions by artists across every genre imaginable. Within the Beatles, McCartney's role was defined by an instinct for melody so immediate and reliable that it appeared effortless. It was not effortless. The recording sessions documented in Let It Be and the expanded Get Back release show a musician who arrived to every session with fully formed ideas, who worked through arrangements with a persistence that the other members found alternately inspiring and exhausting, and who held the band together through force of professional will long after the personal relationships had deteriorated beyond repair. He filed the lawsuit that legally dissolved the Beatles' partnership in 1970. He has spent the decade since managing the complex emotional legacy of that decision, the public perception of him as the Beatle who broke up the Beatles, the legal disputes with Lennon's estate and Yoko Ono over songwriting credits, the gradual rehabilitation of his reputation as the full scope of his contributions became clearer over time. He lost his first wife, Linda, to breast cancer in 1998. He survived a publicly catastrophic second marriage. He married a third time. He continued touring stadiums into his 80s. Paul McCartney plays to audiences of tens of thousands of people who sing every word back to him. The songs are 60 years old. The audiences contain grandchildren of the people who first heard them. He does not appear to be considering stopping. He has never appeared to be considering stopping. That more than any single song or achievement may be the most remarkable thing about him. Ringo Starr. Ringo Starr was, by general consensus including his own, the least naturally gifted of the 4 Beatles. John Lennon said so. Paul McCartney implied it. George Harrison, who rarely commented on such things directly, said enough to suggest he agreed. Ringo Starr has spent 60 years agreeing cheerfully and then going back to playing drums. He was born Richard Starkey in Liverpool in 1940. He grew up in poverty. He suffered serious childhood illnesses that kept him out of school for years and left him with gaps in his formal education he never fully closed. He taught himself drums in his late teens. He joined Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. He built a reputation in the Hamburg club circuit as a drummer who was reliable, rhythmically precise, and exceptionally good at serving a song rather than dominating it. That last quality is precisely why he was right for the Beatles. The recordings bear examination on this point. Ringo Starr does not play the way technically superior drummers play. He does not fill every available space. He does not demonstrate his ability. He plays what the song needs and stops when the song stops needing it. Come Together, Something, A Day in the Life. The drum parts on the Beatles' most complex recordings are models of restraint and musical intelligence that technically proficient drummers routinely fail to replicate. After the Beatles dissolved, evolved, Ringo Starr released a string of successful solo singles in the early 1970s. Photograph You're 16, It Don't Come Easy, with 2 of them reaching #1. He acted in films. He narrated the children's television program Thomas the Tank Engine for its first 2 seasons and became...
I've been seeing that Thomas and the Tank in most of the like storybooks, in most of the kids like cartoons and TV shows. I didn't see. I think it was in our like most of our like books in primary school.
Oh, I didn't have
You were
that
not
chance.
kid, but it was there. Most of the stories in the maybe English subjects and yeah,
Okay.
it was having Thomas and the Tank.
Came for a generation of British children, primarily famous for that. He has been touring with his all-star band since 1989. He performs every summer. The band roster changes. He does not. John Lennon was assassinated in 1980. George Harrison died of lung cancer in 2001. Stuart Sutcliffe died in 1962. Pete Best was replaced before the fame arrived. Ringo Starr, the drummer they brought in to replace someone else, the one everyone agreed was the least essential, the one who cheerfully concurred with that assessment for 6 decades, is one of the 2 Beatles still standing. He still tours, he still plays, he still seems by all available evidence to be enjoying himself. That may be the most unexpected ending of any story the Beatles...
Okay, that is it. So we had a chance to get a story of all the 6.
Yeah, 6 guys who have ever been in the Beatles.
Yeah, from Pete to
Best.
Stuart, to Stuart and the rest of the 4 members.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and the best part was the Pete is I had Pete and Stuart. Yeah,
I think I didn't know of Stuart, but Pete, we've ever done one of his stories.
Yeah.
And we got to understand how he left the Beatles.
By the way,
Yeah.
but on the Stuart, it was our first time
and
to hear about him. Huh?
Yeah, because I think it was also his life was like very short.
Yeah, it was cut short.
Yeah.
I think thank you first
so
done for this. Yeah, we so thank you done for such a interesting and knowledgeable part of the Beatles. Huh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We didn't know much about all that, but at least we get to understand. We've gotten some few background and information about the Beatles.
By the way.
Yeah, from their formation to the end.
And also life after the Beatles.
Exactly.
You know, that's the greatest part of it. You see, there's those who still like the 2 remaining Beatles. They still carry the legacy of the Beatles.
Exactly. Yeah. So wow, hope you really got something out of this, guys. Share your thoughts. Maybe where we are wrong, correct us.
Yeah.
Where we have not tackled, you can add it on the comments, and we will appreciate it so much. So we'll be waiting for your thoughts.
Yeah, subscribe meanwhile and stay tuned.